Thank you very much for this kind presentation. Good afternoon. I am Giuditta De PRATO from the Institute of Prospective Technological Studies in Sevilla, in Spain, in Europe. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity to share with you and to present to you the result of a common project, which, but in the framework of which we co-authored a report together with Claudio Feijó, the University of Madrid, and Jean-Paul Simon. And let me just introduce a word about the research institute for which, in which this project was developed. The Institute for Prospective Technological Studies is one of the 7 research centers that belong to the European Commission. These 7 research centers are spread all over Europe and are devoted to provide scientific-based evidence to support the policy-making process at a European governmental level. So the idea is to have 3 independent research centers devoted to provide investigation and research results, both on the socio-economic and on the scientific technological domain, in order to frame and to support policy action at the European level. In this framework, a project was started in 2009 to identify the most dynamic and disruptive technologies, those that were supposed to affect in a disruptive way the market and the industry in the present, in the coming years. One of this, of course, was the video game industry. So what I'm going to present now very humbly, I would say, after the so many catching presentations we saw in these 2 days, are the results of this first research project on the video game industry and the evolution of in serious games and their effect in the evolution of the e-services. More than to teach anything, because to an audience like you, I have nothing to teach, to gather your, to validate our effort, to gather your comments, and possibly also to start interaction, because as a researcher, we validate our founding in the academic environment, but in order to focus and to target policymakers, we definitely need the support of the industry, of the experts, of the professionals. For this reason, very often, yearly at least, we run special meetings or a conference in which experts like you are invited to actually feed the researcher with the vision and perspective which are going to be the base of our study. So I will go briefly on the results of this project. First of all, identify the video game segment as the most dynamic and disruptive in the already dynamic media and entertainment industry. As a second step, we try to identify the evolution in the value chain and the change in the business model which are underlying the video game segment, focusing on the 2 most dynamic parts, so the online ecosystem and the mobile ecosystem, looking at, taking a look at the role of platforms for developer in the mobile ecosystem, and reaching some conclusions about the role of video games and serious games in particular in the developing of the future e-service segment, which are actually the basis for the evolution of this analysis into the following steps. So let's start with a quick overview of some figures about the dynamic of this industry. Based on PricewaterhouseCoopers data, so business data, because the first remarks that we have to do is that still we cannot provide the policymaker with official data to any extent, so we are aware of the fact that more and more data sources are available, and then the big data trend, as just presented, is becoming a serious important issues and a source of analytics, but still at the moment data with a worldwide perspective or even regional perspective are still relatively hard to find. Anyway, based on PVC data of 2012, we can just have an idea that the video game segment was growing 4 times faster than the overall media and entertainment industry, with scoring about $52 billion in 2009 and expecting to reach more than $80 billion in 2015. There are regional specificity and regional features. We are aware of the fact that the Asia-Pacific region not only is showing the most clear dynamics, but also became the largest market for video games already in 2010, again based on basically the only data that we have available. But not only already scored the highest position, but it's also the fastest growing and is expected to be the fastest growing in the next 5 years. Out of the 4 top countries in the ranking, 3 are out of the Asian Pacific region. After China, over to Korea in 2010, and placed after US and Japan. Now 3 of the top countries are Asian. EMEA, to which Europe is belonging in this statistical regional breakdown, is still rating as the second market in 2010 with about $17 million US. Again, on regional features, there is also a kind of specificity in the segment in which each world region is dominating. Asia leads for sure for everything related to online and mobile games, while the PC-based video games are still significant in Europe, even if rapidly declining. North America is still leading in terms of market for handheld and consoles. And Latin America, in spite of the rapid growth of countries like Brazil, for example, is still lagging behind and is expected to cover a small share. Different patterns are also evident in terms of segments. Even if there are no news in this picture, the source is iDate of the December 2011, and it's showing the comparison between data on 2011 and expectation for 2015 for what pertains the different sub-segment in the video game market. As expected, the share of offline computer games is shrinking and is slowly reducing also the role of handheld and consoles, while no wonder mobile video games is rising from 12% of the market to an expectation of covering 18%. So exactly no news, if not that the online, generalizing, calling online everything that is online and mobile based is going to be to make the lion's share. An overview of what happened in terms of value creation, starting with focusing on the online aspects. How revenues generated by segment and by regions are expecting to evolve in the time period between 2011 and 2015. We see again on iDate data, on the left graph, the revenues from online computers in million euro, and the breakdown by regions. Asia Pacific region is clearly leading with a performance starting a bit lower than 10 billion euros to an expected growth up to almost 15 billion euros for 2015. Again, no surprises when you switch to the right part of the screen, where offline computer game revenue are represented. And we see that also the magnitude is completely different. We are talking about 1.5 billion euros, and in this case, anyway, the leading area is Europe. So we think basically we can just confirm what we all know and expect, but with the figures that are even more impressive because they show how quickly the online game segment is going to raise its importance. So in this graph, the idea was to try to represent the evolution of the role of actors along the value chain on one dimension, but also taking into account the evolution of business models, and so the different repartition among revenues drivers on the other dimension. So on the horizontal dimension, we see the main, some categories, a few categories of drivers of revenues, while on the vertical axis, the broadly broad groups of actors along the value chain. Starting from what was the picture of the past, in which, not exactly, by the way, not even in this proportion, but hardware manufacturer were still in holding a position. Developers and publishers were representing an important part, but in which developers were hardly allowed to share profits, and the amount of, or the share of profits devoted to the work of developers was extremely low, especially in the far past. While ISP and portals were starting to increase their importance, and distribution and retailers still were playing an important role in the value chain. This picture we are recording how quickly it is being modified by the explosion of the online game segment, with the shrinking role of hardware manufacturers and the almost disappeared of retailers, or which are still devoted to some specific activities, but are reducing very much their role. While on the other side, portals are showing as a renewed actors, because they play a role of allowing users to reach quicker their providers, and in which developers are even allowed to reach directly customers in certain situations. So along the vertical axis of the important and the relative share of importance in the value chain, things are changing quickly. But things are changing quickly also on the other dimension, when we take into account the sources of revenue. So the main revenues model of retailing is reducing its importance, and is already pertaining only to a few specific categories of video games, while secondary revenue options are growing their importance, not only for what it is related to standard advertising, but as addressed in the opening speech this morning, to different forms of specific advertising that are taking place inside and outside the game environment. Finally, additional new revenue options are revealing. Among them, of course, the virtual items and the microtransaction explosion is the most obvious one, and that of revenue connected to game extension and other specific activities is also taking care. So the full picture of revenues production and the business model which are supporting this revenue production has been changing and deconstructed and reconstructed. So just to summarize, the main line and drivers of evolution in the segment, taking into account, first of all, the actors. We see that some of them are losing their importance, the specificity of their role, while other actors like portals and aggregators are developing a completely new role. But also new opportunities are opening for studios, for example, and developers, which could address directly the final user. So the value chain is undertaking a process of disintermediation, with some intermediaries which are disappearing, but also reintermediation with the rise of new actors, behind which the business models are evolving very quickly. And I think that the opportunity we had in these days to test how quickly they are evolving and how many new possibilities are presently at stake was very important. Also, the demand, of course, changed very quickly. Still, at the policy level, was not taken for granted that now the demand for video games was covering basically all age and a much wider part of the population. And this is one of the main drivers instead of the attention of policymakers, because this is what is triggering the need of social attention. Quickly going to the same kind of analysis for what concerns mobile games and the role of platforms. Here a very small picture of a sketch representation of the ecosystem for mobile games, making reference to the three-stage model for digital mass consumption, in which the first area has to do with creation, development, and production. Then there is the stage of delivery, distribution, and access. And the third big part of the domain of the ecosystem is represented by the use, consumption, and interaction. In this ecosystem, they are represented, the actors are represented and their role, and the many roles that they cover in each of the domain of the ecosystem. So without going in details, the synthesis that the ecosystem behind the mobile games is much more complex, and the role and activities of actors is much more differentiated than what was expected to be a few years ago. This is basically pushed by the evolution of the system, it's increasing transaction cost, and is pushed by the evolution of the system, in which the core point is not anymore the control by a single firm of this ecosystem, but is like a situation in which multiple firms are interacting for the control of the domain. Basically, this is representing the switch into an ecosystem where different platforms are co-represented. The specification, clearest the specification is, of course, when we go into details and we take a look to the different platforms in which actors are aggregating the mobile game segment. Without going in detail, we see that among other actors, but even taking into account the first three, this analysis is 2009, so it's not actually the most up-to-date. But of course, you can distinguish between closed models, open models, semi-open models. So a very complex environment, which is being supported by this impressive data, of course, regarding the increased availability of the infrastructure, in this case mobile broadband, which is expected to cover 80% of population by 2020, and by the increasing availability of smartphones, again expecting to cover 81%, more than 80% in 2020. To give an idea of what you for sure know already, this graph represents, based on Apple data 2011, the growth in availability of application through the app stores of Apple. A few conclusions out of this landscape that has been that we try to draw, basically. Out of what we said up to now, the clear point for us is that those two segments are collecting the most advanced technology, are using technology which have been constantly interchanged with other technology. Technology is anyway changing very rapidly and could still be a wildcard. It is affecting business in other markets, as it happened already for whatever motion recognition tools and many other devices. And it is likely to be the real lab, the lab for the evolution of the services. So the the changes are going to, the change in the video game industry and specifically in the mobile and online segments are supposed to be those leading the evolution of e-services, with spillovers in domain which are very important for policymakers, e-health, education, and of course everything related to serious game for education, for inclusion, everything related to the applied games, but also for the government services in which are already exploited since some years. Moreover, a clear phenomenon of convergence is taking place in terms of technologies, as I just mentioned, but also in terms of business model and services. Expecting to have the video game segment as the functioning interactive content in the 3D internet world as well. Also being the promoter of the business model which are going to... Let's see whether I can move to the end. Yeah, okay, this we can skip. So at this point, I would just thank you for your attention and mentioning that the complete report is available online. This is the page where you can download this report together with the other 6 related to the most disrupting segment that we're developing in the framework of the complete project. This project is now concluded, but our institute is started some months ago, a new one specific on serious game, especially devoted to education and inclusion. So we would welcome any comment directly or via emails, and hopefully also we would be glad to be allowed to ask you for your support and participation in the next phases of this project. Thanks a lot.